Erin Herle, welcome to the Earthy Delights podcast. What's the crack? How are you doing?
I needed that,
Yeah, a little
um,
translation there.
there's Irish in my blood, I swear.
Okay.
It's somewhere deep in there. Maybe I knew that in a past life. It's good. It's good. Just getting back to training and being in Los Angeles, we have everything's opening up again. So I'm finally back to like training in real life from the whole COVID pandemic debacle. So that's pretty much where I'm at
Nice.
now.
Nice. Yeah, you were saying just before like we press record that you've actually said to your your coach now that you're actually looking for a fight actively. So like
hmm
it's kind of ramped it up a level. So
Yeah, yeah,
I was like,
yeah.
yeah,
Like
I don't
every
think
time I walk down the street, I gauge and I'm like, that guy would be good for a fight. I'll fight him. I'll fight him.
yeah.
That's
See,
about
this is
where I'm
how
at
like
now.
this is how your mentality is so different from mine and pretty much
Yeah.
everyone else who's listened to this podcast. Like, I never think that way. But for people who don't understand that, like, what is this girl talking about? Like, tell me a bit about yourself. Like, what do you mean when you're saying you're training and all this? And like, yeah. So what's like your profile?
So I'm a jiu-jitsu black belt, a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt, and I got my black belt in 2017. I started training in 2009. So it was a good, 10 years. I started when I was just turning 20. I was never an athlete before that. So I found jiu-jitsu and it's very technical. It's for the smaller opponent. And there wasn't any like face punching. And of course, I watched the UFC at the time and I told myself, okay, when I'm a purple belt, a solid purple belt, a few years into training, I'm going to go to MMA. And I never did because, instead I wanted to be a high level athlete. So I was a high level athlete. Every belt level, I was, doing the worlds, doing the pans, the big tournaments. And I did really well and I got promoted to black belt finally. And then I was like, I'm going to do MMA. And rarely do people go from like hugging it out on the floor to like full on punching and kicking each other in the face. So,
Right.
besides COVID, I really did take pretty much the year off. But prior to that, I had my first amateur MMA fight. So that's kind of my focus now, is getting back into training because last year I did like a whole like paramedic program, which is we call it EMT. It's like basic. I was going to
Mm.
go into firefighting. I was like, I'm going to change my whole life because this whole
Nice.
pandemic made me think. So
Yeah.
yeah, so now I am also a founder of Submit the Stigma, which is a mental health charity within the jiu-jitsu community. It's been around since 2016. And I just try to promote mental health as a priority, just like we do physical health. Obviously, training when we're like, oh no, my ankle's hurt, I can't train. But there's also
Mm.
times when we step on the mat and it's like my head's not right, or I'm
Yeah.
really upset and I can't figure out why, or I didn't sleep that well last night and now I'm irritable, or just different things. You need to pay attention to how your mind is, how your feelings are, and whatnot. And I think that
Right.
sometimes people try to separate it when they step on the mat, but it's very
Yeah.
real. You can't separate it. It's human emotion. We're all human. And I like to remind people of that, especially when I go into training or a fight, and people like to be
Mm.
like, right, like cyborg, right? There's like, I know
Mm.
three different people with the nickname cyborg, like, because you want to
Yeah.
feel like you're invincible.
Uh-huh.
And I'm just like, no, you're human. Like
Yeah.
I may hit you in the face and you may cry. Like, it's okay. Just punch me
Yeah.
back after. So yeah, mental
I,
health, MMA, all that is what I'm up to now.
Beautiful. And I mean, I said this before, before we started recording, but I was like, I've recently started to get back into jiu-jitsu and I managed to like kind of rope my girlfriend in. And I was saying to Jim, who unfortunately can't be with us today, but I was saying, oh man, I really want to get like a jiu-jitsu guy or girl on to the podcast. I was like, actually, I think it'd be more powerful if it comes from a girl because automatically people think of like martial arts as like being very macho, and I think like it
Yeah.
can turn people off when a guy's just saying like you're saying like, oh, I'm invincible and this, that, and the other. And I was like, man, I really want like a female jiu-jitsu champion, but it'd be cool if like, obviously we're a mental health podcast. I was like, they need to have some sort of mental health link. So I did the old Google and boom, you showed it right up. And I was like, the gods have been smiling down on me. But what I was wanting to say as well, like you said there, and you're talking about like how like your mental health is, or your mental state is as important as your physical state,
hmm
and you can only kind of expect the best results when the both are at like optimum levels. Do you think, I mean, this is just from, I mean, like I said, I'm only a novice, I'm only a white belt, and I'm just like, just starting in this. But I've noticed like I used to do karate when I was a young kid, and I've noticed like little differences from karate to jiu-jitsu, whereby
hmm
I feel like in jiu-jitsu they're way more even though like it's brutal, like people can choke you the fuck out and all
Yeah.
this stuff and break your arm and all of that, but like I feel like it's way more cerebral, and I do feel
Hmm.
like in a way they kind of would take that. Where what I'm trying to say is, if you went to a mat or you went to like your coach and you were like, hey, look, I'm not feeling it today, or my head's not really at the right space, they're not gonna like laugh you out of the gym. Where I feel like in other more traditional kind of martial arts, like you said, it's very macho and it's more like
Hmm.
that's not taken into play. Would you agree with that? Like, is that your experience as well?
I think it depends on your goals. So for
Mm,
me, and I just like I told you that I told my coach, like, okay, I'm ready for a fight. When I was doing jujitsu and I was competing, when you're competitive, and I trained under three different professors that are all multiple time world champion legends. So, when you tell them like, I want to be just like you, and then they're like, okay, so you're gonna train twice a day, you're gonna work out, you're gonna diet, you're gonna do this, this, and this. And if you
right.
say, obviously they understand if you have like a job or you have school, which I did at some point during my career. But then it's like you go full time and it's like, they're like, well, why are you just sitting on the couch? Like, I get it. It's hard. But like, if you want anything worthwhile, you got to do it.
Mm,
You have to
mm,
show up.
mm.
Um, so I think it's different. So when you tell your goals to someone and you say, I'm going to be a black belt world champion, they're going to hold you to a very
To
high
that,
standard, right? But
yeah.
if you just say, I'm Jim, I got two kids at home, I work full time, and I come here, my wife lets me work out for an hour with my friends, and I love it. Yeah, absolutely. They don't care whether you are training, but when you are so called repping their team and they want you to
Mm,
win, they want you to do your best. They don't want someone going out there and being like, well, I'm overweight, I didn't make weight, or not professional. And I know that
yeah.
competitions in terms of jujitsu are like, put your lower belt, go have fun. That's fine. Just have, go
Mm,
have fun.
yeah.
But as soon as you're like, I want to be sponsored, I want to be like a high level athlete, and I want to get paid to do this, and then I'm going to post instructionals on Instagram, and I'm going to really build up being the athlete version. They're going to hold you to that. So yeah, it just
Right.
depends. I mean, but that's the same with everything. Like if you have just a regular job and you're like, I just come here to get a paycheck and then I go home, right? Versus this is my dream job and I can't
Mm,
wait to go further in it. So like that's what I love about jujitsu. And I know that there's like this tagline that jujitsu is for everyone. And it really is. It's just that maybe someone who looks at me is going to go, oh, well, does that mean that everybody competes? Like I thought everybody competed, and it's definitely not true. A very
yeah.
small amount of people compete. So it's
Yeah.
just a great lifestyle type of martial art, but it depends on
Yeah.
like what you want to do. But in terms of like getting hurt or mistakes or accidents, things like that, it's very easy to
Mm,
just move around, flow, do things nice. It's harder to punch someone and then gauge how strong you are and gauge how hard you're
right.
punching, which is something that I had to work
Yeah.
on when my training partners were like, dude, we're just light
Okay.
sparring. And I'm like wailing on them
Yeah.
because I don't know. So jujitsu also, when you said cerebral, I was like, yes, because I had to explain to some people, I'm like, striking is so different because I'm not touching. It's really my eye contact, right? So I have to be able to see when a punch is coming to be able to defend it.
Mm,
Versus
mhm,
jujitsu, it's like once I'm on you, I can close my eyes and I can do
mm,
whatever I'm doing. Of course, when you're a white
yeah.
belt, you may not even realize that like you're in half guard, top half guard, and someone's locked on your leg, and then all of a sudden it's free, and all you have to do is step over into mount, but you have no idea of that self awareness. So it's
Yeah.
definitely just be getting more aware of what you're capable of doing and like the feeling of like
Mhm.
knowing what's happening without having to see it.
Yeah,
You know what
right.
I mean?
And like for you, for someone who's gone in there and has said like from the jump, like I want to be a black belt, like I want to be a
Mm-hmm.
world level in, and I want to be a specialist in like jujitsu before any MMA stuff. You know, you've said like you're a mental health advocate and you've had your own problems. I mean, let's start here. Like, what did you suffer with? And then my
Mm-hmm.
follow up question would be like, how did that play into kind of your journey to becoming a black belt? Because you said there that you like, so you're being held to the highest standards possible, and yet you're still kind of like wrestling with
Mm-hmm.
these demons. So how did that all play in?
A lot. And I think the hardest part also is when you have an instructor that doesn't understand exactly like the emotion, especially being a girl. I was the only girl when I first started, at least that was like full time, like really into it. There were some girls that would come, but like not really into it. And I'm more emotional. So like being more than a guy, like, so I think that's also the hard part of people not understanding. But the thing is, when I started jujitsu, I didn't even understand like why I was the way I was. I just knew that growing up, I had a lot of emotions, like
Right.
a lot of emotion. Like I would, someone would say, "Oh, I don't want you to come over anymore," and I just have a mental breakdown, like nobody likes me, and oh my god, and
Hmm.
I have no friends, and you get like you catastrophize everything. I
Hmm.
think is like the best
Hmm.
way to put it. Even growing up when I was in my teens, like if anything happened, I remember I had a friend. I got a flat, and I was on the side of the freeway, and there's a lot of like trucks going by, and it was middle of the night, and my friend that I had just left her house wasn't answering. And by the
Right.
time she had called me back, she told me that the sound of my voice made it seem like I was getting raped at that moment. Like that's how distraught I would be. So jujitsu was good for me. And it was also like really, really hard because I had to put the emotion aside. And that's really hard to do. So I have since been diagnosed with ADHD, depression, and anxiety. And by anxiety, I mean generalized anxiety disorder, meaning my body will just all of a sudden, the physical things of like chest being tight and like your body goes like, oh, it's so aware all of a sudden, like the fight or flight mode. And I have no idea what's causing it. I'm like racking my brain, like, what is it this time? So it's just
Hmm.
in general, I get that like feeling. So imagine going into a competition where someone is literally trying to just choke you out.
Right.
And I
Right.
think that's and I started competing 3 months in. I did 3 months and I was like, oh, Professor, can I compete? And he was like, sure, if you want. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go do it. And then just from then on, it was like, this is what I do now. And it's so scary. Everything is so scary. So when I first kind of dabbled in anxiety, it was prior to jujitsu because there was a study online. We have Craigslist here. And it was like, get paid to take like a medication, and maybe it's a
Hmm.
placebo, maybe it's not, but get like $500. And so when I was in college, this was about 2008, 2009. And I was like telling all my friends, like, yeah, I found this thing. All I have to do is go in once a week and answer some questions and like take this pill or whatever. So
Right.
awesome. I'm getting like $500. And then of course that's the stigma of mental illness of like, I'm not going in because I'm sick. I'm going in because I just want some money. I'm a college student. So that was
Hmm.
like the beginning. And I remember having major breakdowns. I still don't know if I took the drug or if I had a placebo, but either way, it screwed with my head a lot. And I had like panic attacks and stuff. So just like you were saying before we recorded, you said I wanted to do jujitsu. I couldn't step into a gym. Well, it took me a
Yeah.
year. I was introduced to a competition of jujitsu and I was like, this is so awesome. And I even knew of a place that was near my work at the time. And I couldn't do it. And finally, it was like a random day that I was over at my friend's house. And I was like, can you just go with me? We'll just go check it out. We'll
Mm.
just go walk in. We'll just go check it out, And then the guy was like, yeah, perfect. Here, come tomorrow at this time. And I knew a couple dudes that were already there. So thank God,
Hmm.
like I knew someone. And just from there, being in the weird gi and putting it on. So with mental health wise, I mean, this was like me not even knowing that I had mental health issues and then slowly figuring out like, is this why I have so many issues with relationships, with frustration, with competing and having to delve in a little bit and realizing that there was a lot of just stuff that I needed to go through to be able to win anything. I mean, if you don't, and that's what I learned. I think when you don't like yourself, you can't do shit. Like you will not be able to
Mm.
accomplish anything. And I'm not talking just like tasks or like I'm talking about competition. And I'm not talking about a dance competition where you have to do your best. No, no, no. Jiu-jitsu is you do your best, and sometimes it doesn't matter. For
Yeah.
whatever reason, this person got more points than you, kept you in a better position, submitted you. Things happen, just
Hmm.
like how
Hmm.
crazy knockouts happen, like it's not by chance, but I
Yeah.
mean, you get caught. So it's
Yeah.
very hard when you train full time and you quit everything, like take a semester off school, stop working for a little bit and you're giving your best and it's not good enough. So facing
Mm.
those, I was like suicidal. And that's when it was
Mm.
like, okay, this isn't this isn't working. And
Right.
so learning, not necessarily like people with depression have this, this, and this, and so do I. It's not really about well, what is it about depression or anxiety or ADHD that is affecting my performances? It was more so like, why am I like this, and why do I struggle so much? Because in
Right.
life, you don't just struggle in competition. You struggle in life. There are things with, maybe you don't communicate well with people, or maybe you feel like you're hurt by someone and you don't know how to tell them, things like that. So
Yeah.
when I'm training and you're able to solve those problems like immediately, right? It's like
And,
you're in training,
yeah.
you know?
And do you think like this is the thing, like, when I was saying for years beforehand, like I really want to do jiu-jitsu, I really love it. Like I'd watch
Mm-hmm.
UFC and it really got me into it. And then I'd go like down wormholes and I was like into it without being in it,
Yeah.
if you get me.
Yeah.
And then I was like, eventually I was like, Seb, you need to shut up or like do it, like one of the
Mm-hmm.
two. So then eventually like I just did it but then I imagine like that as a girl, because I mean, I went in and my first class, it was all guys.
Yep.
Eventually I saw a girl like maybe in my fifth class in, but like even though it's not so macho in the sense of like a boxing gym or something, but it is still like testosterone feel in the air, like
Oh
you can
yeah.
feel it. And
Mm-hmm.
I
You
always
could
like,
smell it.
whenever I see whenever I see a girl there, I always give them like, in my head at least, I give them more kudos for being there. Like, forget their level belt or whatever. I'm just like, that's like, because if I was a girl, I'm not sure if I would have the courage to go there. So that's like the minimum level, right? That's just going and like just like rolling around and just getting taught like new stuff
Mm-hmm.
as a white belt. But then there's like competing, which, like you said, is that's a different animal, because you're now like going in there against someone else who also wants to break your arm or tap you out or break your leg or whatever it is, right? And for someone who has like anxiety, I mean, that's anxiety inducing for a normal, quote unquote, normal person who doesn't have anxiety, let
Yep.
alone someone who has anxiety, and you're like, oh shit, like tomorrow it's
Yeah.
like this is the situation. And I feel like I just wanted to ask, by repeatedly putting yourself in those situations, do you feel like that's actually helped you deal with your anxiety kind of in
Mm-hmm.
when you step out of competition and out of jiu-jitsu and like into your real life, where it's like all of a sudden you've got an anxiety attack in the supermarket, for example, and you're like, oh, this isn't shit, like yesterday I was getting tapped out by this girl, like I'm now just
Yeah.
like picking out my cereal. Do you know what I mean? Like, does it help
Yeah.
you overcome that?
Yeah, like there's definitely confidence. And like I said, like you have to like yourself, right? And so jujitsu
Mm.
allowed me to like myself. And that took a lot. I mean, I had training partners, coaches that had to basically beat it into me that like you can do this. And as long as you don't get frustrated or like let your emotions get in the way, you can conquer anything, kind of thing. Like that's what it
Hmm.
feels like. So definitely being a woman, I always did what I call like man stuff. Like my dad didn't have a son; I was the son. So like
Right.
I've always done things like that are like dude stuff. But I was never an
Hmm.
athlete. I hung out with a bunch of dudes. I love dick and fart jokes. Like that's just my humor. That's what I grew up on. I'm like I can be like
Right.
a dude. So I would say that I blended in more than most. And of
Hmm.
course, like when I first started training, I had like press on like nails, and I had like makeup on all the time because I had really bad acne and I was so embarrassed by it. And they would get on someone's gi and I'm like, I swear it's gonna wash out. So being a girl is very, very different, but I liked being one of the guys. So if I had
Hmm.
started and it was simply just like a female class and a female instructor and like that's all I did, I don't think I would have liked it as much because I really do like the gnarliness of it, like the
Hmm.
wrestle, the physicality. Um, I love giving noogies to people, like I'm just a
Yeah.
rough, I'm a very like rough, like hands-on type of person. So it's hard for me to say, yes, as a female, you're going to love this. Like if there's going to be parts of it that you love and there's parts that are challenging and the challenging is what makes
Mm.
you come back. There's
Yeah.
things that you're
Yeah.
like, I like doing that. Yeah. But like, there's no growth. And I feel like every time you step off the mat, there's growth,
Hmm.
and just like confidence, like, at any moment when I'm walking down the street or I have my head held high. And I know that some
Mm.
people have said, like, don't act like a victim, don't be unaware, don't be all on your phone, this and that. Like, it helped me learn to like be just aware of just my surroundings and
Hmm.
know that I am in control of me. That's
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
biggest thing I think that jujitsu
Yeah.
teaches you is that no matter what this other person is doing in this role, they're trying to pass your guard, they're trying to stuff your head somewhere, they're trying to pull your arm away. I have control over me. That's it.
Hmm.
So you have to
Yeah.
really and that's also like, wow, it's a lot of responsibility. And then the other side is like, wow, like whatever I choose to do, I can do. And so that was what it was. And I did a lot of things that just surprised me. Like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. And there was one time that I won double gold at like purple belt, and I beat this girl, and my ex at the time was like, he knew not to tell me that she had just beat Mackenzie Dern, who is
No way. Yeah.
so she had just beat Mackenzie Dern, and then I beat her, which means nothing at all in
No,
jiu-jitsu.
yeah, yeah. That's like fight math, where it's like, well, if you beat him and I beat him, then that
right.
means that I'm better than him. It's like, no, like.
So you beat that guy and I beat you, so I already beat him. Like, it has nothing to do with
Exactly.
that.
People always do that. Yeah.
But it would have psyched me out if I had found out
Right.
that like this girl, oh my God, like, and I would have been like,
Yeah,
oh no,
yeah.
what is she gonna do? And too worried about what she's good at, what she did to Mackenzie, what she did to other people that are really high level. And instead of that, I just went and said, okay, I'm going to do what I do. And then I won. And so that's why, even as a professional, I guess you could say, in jiu-jitsu, as a black belt, a competitor, even people that I've lost to, it's very, very hard to fight them again, because it's like, all you can think about is visualizing the last time it happened, or the last 2 times. And I've lost to someone 3 times before. And it's just like, it's disheartening. So there's always a challenge. It's always hard, but in the way that once you accomplish something, it feels really good. And that's what they say for mental health, is goal setting. Goal setting is a huge element of a lot of things, including happiness and growth and knowing yourself and feeling like you can do anything. And also being a female, a lot of it is in jiu-jitsu that you don't go up to someone and want to fight them. I mean, even though you know how, it's normally you're subduing people. So if someone attacks you, you subdue them, you push them off, whatever, and you run. So like, I'm still going to run. I'm not dumb to like go against someone with like a knife or a gun or start a fight or anything like that. So I think also there's a lot of girls out there that have a big mouth, and they may get themselves into trouble. And I feel like jiu-jitsu kind of puts things into reality, especially MMA, because, knowing what it's like to get punched in the face is interesting. Something that like you wouldn't want, but just knowing what people are capable of, and knowing that like, I'm in control of me. I don't have to deal with this if I don't want to. I can walk away. Like, and it's really weird, because it's not like they go into jiu-jitsu class and tell you, hey guys, if you're ever in a physical altercation, run and call the police. It's not like that. It's just, I don't need to deal with this. Like, I just like rolled 7 sweaty dudes. I don't need to also get in a fight with someone else, So it's nice. It's like, centering.
Yeah. And I think it's really like important what you said about the thing, about the point that how jiu-jitsu teaches you how the only thing you're in control of is yourself, and how you can kind of extrapolate that lesson and then take that outside of jiu-jitsu and implement it into like whatever it may be. Because, for yourself, you're a world level athlete and you're now trained to be an MMA, and I assume you want to maybe go into the UFC or something. So that's like, it's kind of very black and white, like, oh, this lesson jiu-jitsu taught me and I'll take it into the cage with me and blah, blah, blah. But for other people, it's like, I'm just rolling and that's all I ever want to do. And maybe I will get to black belt, but like just as a hobby, like I don't ever want to compete. I don't want to ever do anything. But I think a lot of people forget that, is that if you focus on yourself and like only what you can do, then it actually it alleviates a lot of the stress and the anxieties that you may have about any type of situation. Because ultimately, like, and I'm really bad at this, like trying to second guess what people may think or what they may say if I say this and
I'm an
blah blah
overthinker
blah.
too.
And it's like, no, like, I have no idea what they're gonna do, because you never know. Like, so let me just do what I'm gonna do, and then and then we'll take it from there. Like, just like you do when you're rolling in jiu-jitsu, like, I'm going to try the arm bar, but he might be trying to do this. So I'll take it from whatever his next move is. And then it's just like a constant game of chess, but focusing on yourself. And I think that's a real good point that I think a lot of people struggle with, is we try to always... I think actually it's a way of trying to make ourselves feel a bit safer, right? And I think we try to kind of map out the playing field and like, okay, well, if I did this will happen, and then if that happens, this will happen, which means this for me, and blah blah blah. It's like, no, if you just do you, things will take care of themselves. Like, but if you focus on yourself, then you have real power in that, and I think that's a real powerful message.
Well, anxiety in general, anyone who's been to a therapist or has like Googled, it's, well, okay, what can you control?
Mm.
That's immediately what you think of, because the idea of anxiety is like out of control, not having control, not
Mm-hmm.
having the unknown, right? And they always say, if you're, and I'm great at making up, like someone doesn't text me back and I've already
Yeah.
developed this like whole visual of like, well, they're dead on the side of the road because of
Mm-hmm.
this, and this. And
Yeah.
it's just how my brain works, thinking about, not necessarily thinking of the worst that could happen, but it's so easy to do that. So yeah, it's so
Mm-hmm.
easy to do that in rolling, in training. I mean, if you go on the mat and you say, I could get hurt today, you're probably going to get hurt. Or if you say, I'm really
Yeah.
tired, you're probably going to get hurt that day. So there are days that you should take off. But for the most part, it's focus on what you can control, and it does, it alleviates what other people are doing, what other people are thinking, because my mom used to tell me, like, stop caring so much about what other people think. And
Mm-hmm.
I think I strive for connection so much that if a
Mm-hmm.
connection isn't there, I try really hard,
Right.
and I will mold myself into it. And so I
Mm-hmm.
realized that sometimes I find myself doing that. There are times when I competed and there was like maybe a spazzy girl and she was rushing everything, and
Mm-hmm.
I get that vibe from her, and all of a sudden I'm rushing and I'm not
Right.
solidifying any positions, and I'm letting
Right.
her get out of stuff because I didn't sit there and go like, here she's moving, and I didn't go,
Yeah.
and instead I'm like this with her.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah. Yeah.
remember my coach at the time, I was like, make her pay. Like,
Yeah.
make her pay, lean into the shoulder pressure, hold. It's okay to hold someone if they're freaking out,
Mm-hmm.
and work from there. So I
Mm-hmm.
was too keen on picking up what someone else is doing or their energy and maybe not even thinking about it. I'm just that much of like an empath. And I think that's
Yeah.
also part of mental health and being able to connect with other people. Because again, we're tribal. We want to connect to people.
Yeah. Yeah. Of
So
course.
knowing yourself, but not isolating yourself and not saying that
Yeah.
you're better than anyone. Because that was something that I used when I was a blue belt and I was first starting out. I was like, I'd find a reason. I'd be like, that girl's wearing makeup, I'm going to beat the shit out of her.
Mm-hmm.
It would just, I'd find something to like one up
Something.
in
Yeah.
my mind. It's
Yeah.
just so dumb. And I
Right.
wouldn't say that out loud or tell someone to do that, talk
No.
shit
No.
about their
No.
opponents. But it was my way of being like, I got this, and whatever you need to do.
Yeah.
And then I realized it wasn't about the other people. It was
No.
about
No. No.
myself,
But
right?
right.
Like how I feel
Exactly.
about myself. Like, so I always tell people, I say, I usually say, like, that older dude at the gym that's competing and everyone just wants him to do well because he's such a great guy and he's not trying to be a world champion or anything, but you just want him to do well. That's how you should feel about yourself. Like, oh, I don't know why I keep on using Jim. We'll just go with Jim. Oh, Jim, like, oh, yeah, I really want you to win. You're such a good guy. Why can't I say
Uh
that about
huh.
myself? Why can't I say,
Right.
like, I deserve to win? And not even the whole, I've trained more than my competitors and I put in the work. No, I just think that I have what it takes and I'm good enough and I want to win. I can visualize myself standing on the top of the podium, and that's it. And that's, you
Yeah.
cannot you can't crush someone. And I'm sure you've seen this in UFC fights. You can't crush someone who doesn't believe that they should be. Like, there are people
Mm-hmm.
that kind of, oh shit, that guy's really, he's got some heavy hands. Maybe I should do this. Oh no, he's coming at me. Maybe I should just, shoot for a
Yeah.
takedown so I can get out of this.
Yeah.
No, it's like knowing that you have the skills and you don't need to second guess yourself. And again, that's
Right.
everything in life.
Yeah, so there's two topics there that you touched on that I really want to delve into. It's self-confidence and humility. So I'll start with that. I'll actually start with humility. For I like Since I've been doing jiu-jitsu, and I heard people speak about this before, like you listen to Joe Rogan or whoever it may be, and he'd always talk about me. He's a high-level black belt, and he'd say, like, I'd get tapped by, like, purple belts if you're not careful.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you get tripped up, boom, and then you're in, like, in an armbar or whatever, and there's no, it is what it is. Like, your ego has to be left there because otherwise your arm's going to get broken. So, like, tap or have an arm break, like
tap
one
or
or the
snap.
other.
Yep.
And, yeah, exactly that. And I think, like, it's a real, you were saying before how, like, how you can't get too big of an ego before, and you can't like think of yourself like, whilst on the one hand as a competitor, obviously you want to think of yourself as the best, but on the other hand you have to know as well, like, I can only concentrate on myself because things can happen, which obviously I don't want to happen, but if they happen, hey, it happens. And that doesn't diminish me as a person, or in your case, as a competitor. It's just, it's part of the game. Like you can't go and swim without getting wet, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
I like even
that.
me as like so with Louisa. So I go training with my girlfriend. We go to private classes and we go together. And I basically asked her to come along with me. Oh, the popo's rolling past. I asked her to come along with me because she'd basically been having like, we have a little dog and we take him out, and sometimes it's like she'll take him out just before we go to bed or whatever. And every time she would take him out just before we go to bed, there'd always be like drunk guys being like, you know, the typical, you know, lad shit.
Mm-hmm.
And she like just got to a point, she's like, I don't understand why I have to put up with this anymore. And you know, a lot of people are like, well, just don't take the dog out at this time. She's like, it's 10:30 at night that I'm taking him out. Like, I should be able to take my dog out whenever I want to. Like, as a human being, I shouldn't have to deal with this shit. And I said to her, I said, look, like, again, I'm really bad at always making out that what I'm doing is the best thing in the world. I'm like always a spokesperson for my new like hobby. I am the worst at it. But I was like, please come to jiu-jitsu with me, because out of all the martial arts, it's the one where the premise is literally on helping the little guy. Like, it's not like boxing or Muay Thai or kickboxing or wrestling, where ultimately, biologically, like if you're bigger, you're gonna always fuck up the little guy. Like if you're, and I mean that will happen in jiu-jitsu as well. But if the big guy doesn't know anything and you're a 5'2" girl, you will be able to defend yourself and ultimately harm that 6'5" guy if you want to.
Right.
And anyway, she came along, right? She came along and she loves it. But I get humbled because she's this tiny girl who normally, if I want to just like, you know, pick her up and throw her on the bed, I can do that. There's no problems. Physically speaking, she can't do anything against me. But now, like when we're rolling, like she's really good at an armbar for a white belt.
Mm-hmm.
She's fucking good. And all of a sudden I'm like, Jesus, she's got me an armbar. Like, and for myself, that's humbling. Do you know what I mean? And I'm like, and actually I think it's a real good lesson to take into life, to be like, leave your ego at the door and like always be willing to learn and be willing to be humbled, which like, especially as a guy, I'll speak as a guy, I think we're really egotistical and we like to think we're always the best and with this and that and the other. And especially when you have a girl tap you out, it takes a minute to be like, don't take it personally type thing. You know, so yeah, what do you think about that? Like, because obviously I'm sure you've tapped out so many of your training like partners, your guys, and obviously yourself have been tapped out a million times. I'm sure, like you have to be a black belt.
So I have a really good story for this that sort of made things make sense. I was a brown belt, so it was the belt before black belt. So I mean, to see a brown belt female, I mean, I got my brown belt like maybe 7 years in. So I mean, I'm dedicated, right? And I was in London and I was training at a friend's gym, and I was one of the highest belt. Yeah, there's no black belt except for Jude, who was the black belt at the gym. And obviously people are like, who's this bitch? You know, like, and they could be thinking like, why does she not have the same accent as us, but she looks like us? Or it could be, where did she come from? And why does she have a brown belt? Is she good? Should I know who this is? You know, and of course, these are all things that go in my head when I step on the mat, when really all I have to think about is, I'm just a person who wants to train jiu-jitsu. So we did this. I don't know if you know King of the Hill. And so a bunch of people, it's like specific training. So you'll have all these people that are out, and then there's a line. And you have to if you beat them, you stay. If they beat you, you go back to the end of the line. Okay. So I had to go in this guy's close guard, and he's a big white belt. And I'm like, and of course I could be like, all right, this would be easy. But instead I'm like, I want to see what this guy's got. This is a different country, different, you know, style. So he starts pulling at my leg. So I'm on my knees and he starts pulling at my leg. And I realized, like, if he keeps he's trying to sweep me in a mount, and he's like torquing things that don't go that way. So I'm like, I have two choices. Well, maybe three. I could either be like, hey, jerk, stop doing that. But he doesn't know. He's a white belt, you know? And then you could say like, oh, excuse me, you're not doing the technique right. I'm a brown belt. You're a white belt. Let me show you. Or, which is what I actually did, was I accepted the sweep, because I knew that if I was going to fight it and this big dude, I was just going to get hurt because he's putting my leg the wrong way. So instead I had to just give that up, and I go, oh, you won. Good job. And I go back to the end of the line. All these things are going into my head. Like, if people are seeing me, like, I can't even beat a white belt, you know, like it's all of these things. But really, in my head, I know that like, yeah, I want to be able to teach the rest of my seminars. I want to be able to train. So I'm not going to, and I didn't want to ruin that dude's day either.
Yeah.
And I could have maybe said like, hey, but it wasn't the right time. It was like everybody comes in, they train, they go into the end of the line, vice versa. Everything keeps moving.
Right.
It's not the time for me to sit there and teach. And that's another thing that we joke about is when you're getting like, if you were to get a submission on me, instead of tapping, I'd be like, oh yeah. You almost have it, but I'd turn it into like a teaching moment.
Right.
So that
Right.
you could never fully like feel like
Tap
I
you.
got. Yeah.
Right.
So there's different ways that we deal with that. But I think that if you think of it as regular life, if someone comes at you bragging, you're kind of like, cool, dude. So my thing is don't be a dick. And there's also things about the culture, which is don't ask a higher belt to roll. Now, I hate that because I love to travel, and me being the highest belt, no one asks me to roll. And I've got like social anxiety where I don't want to have to ask someone. And I mean, I'm afraid of rejection just like anyone else. And so I would rather have people just say, hey, do you want to go? Yeah. But I'm a black
but also
belt.
that seems silly as well, because like if you take it out of the jiu-jitsu context and you put it into a wider context and you to the debate, okay, don't ask a higher belt to roll is another way of saying don't ask anyone else with more experience to help.
Yeah.
Which is basically like, it's like, well, how am I ever going to learn anything? Like, it doesn't matter what like field you're in. Do you know what I mean? Like, even when you're a little kid, that's like saying to your kid, don't ever ask your parents for help. Just ask your like little brother. It's like, well, I'm going to grow up an idiot then because I need like people with more experience to help me to get to where they are. And like, so that's a dumb rule. And I've never heard that in my, like where I train, but like, yeah, that's a silly rule. But I've always found this, like obviously as a white belt, everyone's always higher than you, right? So that's just standard. But like what I've always found is like when I'm rolling with a purple belt, or I've only ever rolled with a purple or brown belt. I've never really rolled with like a black belt. Unless like the teacher just showed me something. I won't class that as rolling. Anyway, what I found is like they'll teach me, but like in a real, so there's the way that you said where it's like, I've got you, and now you're going to turn it into a lesson just to take away my shine. And that's like a real dickhead move, because that's going to make my day. If I can go home and be like, oh my God, I actually legitimately tapped out a brown belt, that will make my week, right? Yeah. So if you take that away from me, like you're a bit of an idiot. But there's the other way where it's like, they do, like, and I found this in jiu-jitsu, and I think it's like a real nice trait that I don't want to generalize, but I'm going to generalize massively, where people like really just want to like just impart what they've learned, because everyone knows the struggle, everyone knows how horrible it is to be a white belt, that you get beat up on so much, and like every little like little nugget that you get from someone. So I was like, we trained like triangles, and then we were rolling. And I kind of got the guy in a triangle, kind of, but like I'm short, so for me a triangle was kind of hard, yeah. So I kind of had him, but not. And then he just said to me, he's like, "Look, let's just stop here. I'll let you get me in a proper triangle, but when you do it, like clench your knees together as well. Like don't just lock it in, but also clench the knees." And when I did that, and he was like, "Let me show it on you first, so you can feel the difference in pressure."
I love that.
And then he did that, and I was like, "Oh shit, this is a next level triangle." Yep. And then he let me do it on him. Like he let me do it. He's like, "Right, now do it on me." And he's a purple belt. Like he's coming to roll. Like he's not getting anything out of that. Do you know what I mean? Like he's not like he's the teacher who's getting paid for this. He's literally come in. He's paid just like I have, and he's helping me just off his own goodwill. And I think something comes from that. And I think that comes from the humility that like people have in jiu-jitsu, where it's like, we've all been down the same road, and you can look down the line of belts, right? And you can be like, oh, I know how that poor guy feels.
Yes.
Let me help him out. Do you know what I mean? And I think like I love that, and I really want to take that out of jiu-jitsu, like in my own fields where I'm, let's say, a brown belt in whatever it may be, right? You know, like a cooking or whatever, and take that kind of philosophy of knowledge isn't a secret, but it should be shared.
There's so much about that in jiu-jitsu where it's like people like black belts don't want to share their secret stuff, which I don't know. I mean, there's so many ways you could say like, well, maybe they're not ready to learn this. Maybe they're, maybe it's important for them to learn it on their own. Maybe it's, so the thing is that for me being a black belt is a lot of black belts teach, right? So I teach seminars. So I go, I travel, I teach, I say, hey, I'm Erin. I make people laugh. And then I'm like, peace. Like, I don't know if they're going to get their next belt anytime soon. I don't know if they're ever going to use what I teach them. And I hope, and I do get good feedback, but I'm not in charge of their learning. I've never had students that are my own that like I brought up from white belt to whatever.
Of course.
And a lot of my friends and colleagues and peers have, and they do that and they teach it at one place. And then they're like, yeah, either it's a kids program or white belts or whatever. And I don't have that luxury. So I can't speak to that to say, this is why we do that. This is why when we teach, we don't do this or we do this. Because I've always been like, if you're rolling with someone and say you're passing my guard and you're going like, I don't know if you know over unders, you know, and I get my knee out, right? Well, I escaped my knee and that's why you weren't able to complete it. But if I were to just say, hey, dude, got my knee out, that's why I was able to defend that. You're going to go to the next time and go, cool, I'm going to do the exact same thing on someone else. And this time I'm going to make sure that I keep the knee there. Boom. You get it. And I'm like, why wouldn't someone want to like impart that information to someone else so that the struggle isn't so hard? And I like it in rolling because I'm not trying to teach you what I do. I'm just helping you do what you do better. And that's always been a really big thing for me. Like if I do a private lesson, I'm not sitting, some people have been like, just teach me whatever you want to teach. I'm like, that's not going to do anything. Like if it's not something that you already somewhat do, you're not going to implement it into your game. It's like, if I'm this artist and I'm like a realist artist and you want me to do cartoons, like giving me tips on how to do that. I'm like, I don't really give a shit, dude. So like if it's information that I know that you're going to use, I'm like, fuck, dude, why wouldn't I share it?
And I think as well, like, I think maybe that's something that I've seen like parallels in between the two, like you form in one person part of these two groups of like mental health advocates or people who have kind of gone through that struggle and jiu-jitsu. But I feel like it's the same in the mental health world, is whereby when someone is like has struggled and they've come out the other end and they've got that knowledge.
Yeah, I've been there. Been there.
Yeah, when they see someone else struggling, they're not like, oh, I've got these secrets to help you out of your anxiety, but I'm not going to help you. You always want to help. Yeah, you're always like, hey, listen, it might not work for you, but I did this and this really helped me. And I think like that's like this parallel that jiu-jitsu and mental health has. And it's something that I'm trying to take it forward in life now to be like, hey, look, if I know something, like, because I've never come up with anything on my own. Do you know what I mean? Like nothing that I know was invented by Seb. It's not knowledge invented by me. It's something that I've learned from someone else or I've learned through my own mistakes, but a million other people know it as well. Yeah. So I should always try to share that knowledge just because it's such a nice feeling as well. But and that comes as well with confidence, which is what I wanted to talk to you about as well, because I feel like when so in jiu-jitsu, for example, if you're confident in your own abilities and in your own game, then you're happy to teach someone. Whereas if you feel like you only have one move and that's your stick, but everything else sucks, then maybe you don't want to teach the other guy that one move because now you have nothing. Whereas if you're like, hey, look, I'm pretty comfortable at my game, so I'll teach you like whatever because I'm comfortable in myself. And I think jiu-jitsu gives you that. And, because I've seen it I was telling you before we started recording, but I've seen it in like my girlfriend's face where, so we roll and, our teacher will teach, our coach will say, right, okay, let's do this. Let's do the hip escape or let's sweep them so we practice, right? It's just me and her rolling on each other. And whenever she does something to me like correct and it works, because again, the premise of jiu-jitsu is the smaller person should always win if they're using the technique correctly, right? So whenever she does it to me and it works and it comes off just like the coach said it would come off, she's then like, wait, did you let me do that? Or did I actually do that? I'm like, no, like you swept me. Like there was nothing I could do. Like you did it properly. She's like, oh shit, really? And then she gets proper confident. She's like, oh my God, I can't believe like I swept someone who's about 30 kilograms heavier than me. Do you know what I mean? And I wanted to, like, for you, like, what's that like? Like when maybe you can't remember, but like your first tap or like when you got to black belt, when you were finally handed that black belt, like that confidence that it gives you, and how did that kind of seep through into like other areas of your life?
Yeah. Well, I have this really great story at my first gym that there was something that I learned that if you go for a triangle, right, and you have it loose, as soon as they go to posture, switch your hips for the arm bar because they're automatic. They're not thinking about their arm anymore. They're thinking about defending the triangle and they leave their arm out, right? So I remember because a lot of jiu-jitsu at the highest level is timing and transition, right? So like I have to block things that you're starting. If I let you do more, I'm getting deeper and deeper and deeper into a problem. So it's knowing when you're in trouble and how to either deviate or fix that, right? So me being able to do that timing and just go boop, switch my hips and get the tap, and he tapped. This guy will never forget. Okay, he's a good guy. I think he's a black belt now, and he goes, you really got me. Like, you got me. That was real. And I was like, yeah, it's jiu-jitsu. Like, it's technique, you know? And he was like, yeah, but like, I didn't, like, you got me. And I'm like, yeah. And it felt so shitty because I'm like, God forbid, like, a woman is able to use the same technique that you believe in just as much, you know? Like, so that's how I think of it. I try to think of it as like the technique worked, not that you're better than me. You just applied the technique either perfectly or in a good way. And that's why a lot of times when I train, especially in kickboxing, like if I don't have my hand up and they get me or something, like we do light sparring. So it's not like it's like I'm like going down or anything. It's just a quick, nice, like respect. You got that, you know? So the difference between like confidence and ego is that confidence comes from, again, liking yourself. Ego is, who am I better than? Like, who am I better than? And so someone with an ego sometimes is going to go into class and they're going to do the same shit over and over again. And they know that they can do it and they feel good about themselves and they go home. People like me and probably you are like, how can I make this? It's not like we think about it, but if I make you better, it means that you give me a harder time, which makes me better. And I know it sounds so stupid that iron sharpens iron, but really you have to elevate everybody, you know, because if you want to be good, you have to have good training partners and you have to be challenging yourself. And there are people in this world who don't like to challenge themselves, and that's fine. I'm not one of them. I see a challenge and I'm like, yeah, you know, and other people are like, no, I want to be the big fish in the small pond. Yeah. So that's what we say in jiu-jitsu, big fish in small pond. So if you're beating up everybody, you're not in the right place. But if you're comfortable with beating up everybody and going home and not helping anybody and just, you know, doing your own thing, I mean, I can't criticize that, because if that person's paying a membership and helping keep the gym open, who am I to say? But, you know, if you're talking about like the environment, what types of people you want in your academy, you want people to be helpful. One of the gyms that I went to, one of my main gyms, they tried something that was it was never organic. It always felt forced. So it's like, yes, talk amongst yourselves, you know, and you're in a classroom and you turn over and you're like, this is awkward. Hi. Versus just being like organically being like, oh dude, I have that shirt. I love that shirt, you know? Yeah. And so they would roll. I watched a class where it was like a white belt class where they would roll and then they would set a timer. I forget how long. And then they said, okay, give feedback. Use this time to talk to your partner and give feedback on the roll. And as soon as you put someone in that position, they're like, oh shit, like, how do I do this? Is there a format? Do I fill out a report card? What do I do? Versus just like, hey man, every time, if you get the chance to give someone a tip, do it. Or, you know, give feedback rather than, okay, I'm going to grade you on your defense. I'm going to grade you on your, like, it needs to be organic, and people who are like us that are just like people, it comes natural. But if you are led by someone who is not naturally good at that, and you're being like, it almost feels like an assignment, you lose the fact that you're being a good human being. They're not doing it because they want to help you. They're doing it because they're being told to.
Yeah. And I want to bring you back a point you made about challenging yourself, and not a lot of people want to challenge themselves. And I was actually talking to my mate who, like, I've kind of managed to convince to start jiu-jitsu as well. And I was saying to him, I was like, man, like, just think about like I'm just turned 25, and so he's obviously the same age. And I was like, I don't know any of my, like, unless maybe they've started stuff and not told me, but from my own knowledge, like, I don't know really any of my friends who in the last, and okay, let's take out COVID. So since from 2019 and beforehand, in the last 5 years, who have taken up a completely new hobby, or at least tried to take, because again, you might try something and then be like, oh no, this just isn't, I thought it was, but it's not for me. And that's fine. But like, so many of us, it's like we grow up, and Jim's a big stickler for this. Like, we grow up for with this very kind of like rigid idea of our identity. So it's like, hi, I'm Seb. I like football. I like cooking. I like music. That's me.
Yeah.
And it's like that can be you, but you can also, like Jim always says, like we can be fluid with it. Like there's no need for us
Mhm.
to be like static, and like so that can still be you, but
Mhm.
you can also do other things. And like, why not allow yourself to do those other things? Because also the chances that I think personally, the chances of you finding like your absolute passion when you're like 5 years old, they're real slim to none. And like,
Mhm.
if you're one of those lucky people, you know, like a LeBron James or something, found basketball when he was like 5, and that's he dedicated his life to it. That's brilliant. But for the majority of us, that's not the case. And I feel, but the thing is like, it's that nervous thing of being like, oh, yeah, but I know that I'm good at football, or I know that I'm good at
Yep.
cooking, or whatever. So I don't like, I'm comfortable in that thing. Whereas if I now go to jujitsu, I'm going to be the lowest person there. And it doesn't even like jujitsu again, it's a martial art. So yeah, maybe there's that kind of very natural fear of I don't want my arm being broken, or I don't want to be tapped out. Like I don't
Right.
want to be unconscious. That's a very normal fear. But okay, let's take it to ceramics. You might not want to go to ceramics and be that idiot who now lets clay go all over the
Yeah.
workshop. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? And that's
Yeah.
and this is the thing, and it's like, and we don't put ourselves in enough kind of challenging positions, and so then every challenge becomes like a bigger challenge than it maybe would be for someone like
Yes.
you,
Yes.
who rolls on the daily, gets tapped out on the daily, goes into competitions on the daily. Now you've become you want to be in an MMA, and to you that's kind of logical. It's like, well, I want to be in MMA. Now I know that I'm going to have to start on the bottom. I'm
Right
the
over.
white belt of kickboxing. Like it
Exactly.
is what it is. But eventually, I'll be the. I know kickboxing doesn't have those, but the quote
My
unquote
gym
black
does
belt of
actually. Yeah.
kickboxing. Yeah.
Yeah. I
So
wear a
like,
white shirt.
yeah, exactly. So and I think like, can you speak to that? Like for some, and maybe we should take it a bit outside of the jiu-jitsu context, but for people who maybe are scared of challenges, like, can you talk to them about how putting yourself in challenging situations repeatedly over and over and over again eventually kind of helps you diminish that
Mhm.
fear to a point where, like you said beforehand, when you see a challenge, the last thing you have in your mind is to run away from it. If anything, you run towards it. Like,
Yeah.
how do
Yeah.
you get there?
Exactly.
For
Exactly.
someone who's not like that, for someone who
Yeah.
does run away from challenges, how do they get to where you are?
Well, it helps that like I wasn't like this until I started achieving things, right? So
Mm,
if you would if you would have told me that just by trying things you'd make yourself a better person, like it wouldn't it wouldn't cross into what I am now. Like it was not
mm-hmm,
how I did it. I did it
mm-hmm,
because I just stayed and I was stubborn and I just stayed with one thing and I saw how it paid off. And then there's little nuances, right? So I started CrossFit and I was when I lived in New Jersey and New York, I went to a place there. It was a friend of mine that from LA that had opened a gym over there. So I went to that gym. I was strictly more into the lifting. I wanted to learn how to lift. I didn't know how
mm-hmm,
to do anything. So of course you start with the PVC pipe, things like that. So I jump into the class after I get my week long or a couple of times of just getting things going. And I'm an athlete. I know how to use my body. I know how to do like the general workout. And I remember it was pull-ups and it was a timed. So it wasn't just AMRAP, as many reps as possible, where everyone ends at the same time. And then who gives a shit
mm-hmm,
how many reps you got because you all finished at the same time. This one was
mm-hmm.
you have to do this amount of work, and whenever you finish is whenever you finish. And I
Right.
hate those. I fucking hate those because then if you're the last person, CrossFit's great, for most boxes, like they have that you can do it. Everybody like cheers
Mm-hmm,
everyone on. It's a very positive
mm-hmm.
place. There's no like shit talking. But being that last person and being like, and
Yeah.
everyone's watching me, it was mortifying. It was so
Yeah.
mortifying. But I had people who said, dude, that was me. Next time, use a band. Who cares?
Mm-hmm,
Put a band to help you. Scale it. Do what you need to do to accomplish it. But
mm-hmm.
that was embarrassing. It was really, really embarrassing. And it sucks to suck. I get it. But what
Yeah.
I've learned, and my friend has a whole brand that Israel Adesanya just wore this shirt. I'm so happy. It's called Vulnerability is Dope. And that's what it is. People are afraid to be vulnerable. So
Mm-hmm.
growing up, I learned to laugh at myself. We laugh at each other. My mom says something weird, we mock her. My sister
Right.
and I are always, poking fun at like so the way we said something or whatever, and it's like, oh, ha ha, we're just laughing at it. So I figured out how to do that is to laugh, and it's to like make jokes, not to be unprofessional or be like a class clown.
Yeah, but not take yourself too seriously.
Exactly. You can't. So I know when to take myself seriously, and I know when. Like if you're in college, right, and you're
Yeah.
like, especially here, you know, you go right after high school, and it's like, holy shit, I know nothing, and I just have to figure out where my classes are. And look at that dude; he looks like he's 32. I look like I'm 12. This is
Yeah.
weird. Yeah, there's new things, but because it's socially acceptable and everyone does it, we're like, okay, it's okay to be like new at something. So that's how I see it. Like you go to a jujitsu gym, you go to the right class of all the other white belts, and people are like, yeah, I still haven't figured out what's left and right. Let's work together. So finding someone who's on the similar level, like that's so awful to go somewhere. Like your friend says, say you were a purple belt and you're like, oh, I love jujitsu and I really want to take this person and help them, you know, to get into jujitsu too. If I take you to my class and we're all rolling and I try to get you to this, you know, your friend to jump in, it's like, it's not going to work. You have to
Right.
start where your level is, and you have to be surrounded by people at your same level. So for kickboxing, for a very long time before COVID, I just went to the intro classes. So I was going into a class where it was, this is how you do 1, 2.
Yeah.
I was doing classes where literally we're just walking up and down the mat just to get the footing right.
Yeah.
But that's what I needed. I needed fundamentals, and I didn't care. But because when I go to the grappling class, I wear a black shirt. So then I can be like, I'm the shit. I'm a black belt. No one gives a shit that I'm a black belt at my MMA gym. Like, yeah, they think it's cool and they can ask me questions and stuff. But when it comes down to kickboxing and the full MMA classes, like, it doesn't mean shit. I got to take you to the ground first. I got to, you know, so it's
I
very.
think that's a real important point that you make, that you have to kind of get your expectations in check, right? Because whenever we start something, whatever it, like, normally, I'll speak for myself, but pretty much I think this is kind of standard. Whenever we start something, we're inspired by kind of the top echelon of whatever that is. So if that's cooking, like if all of a sudden you're like, hey, I want to take up cooking, it's because you saw like Anthony Bourdain or something, you're like,
Yeah,
oh,
exactly.
he's sick. And it's like, so you go, yes, and you go into this idea, like your first class and you're going to be Anthony Bourdain. It's like, no, you're learning how to scramble eggs. But it's like, but you have to know that like Anthony Bourdain also at one point in his life had to learn how to scramble eggs, and then eventually he gets to the point where he can now inspire people to take up cooking. Or, you know, like MMA, people see, like you mentioned Israel Adesanya, they see him and they're like, fuck, I want to take up kickboxing. It's like, yeah, but he didn't go into his first ever lesson just piecing people up. Like he would have had to do, like you just said, the first thing and just walk around the mat doing a 1-2, probably a little bit bored, but like he's probably thinking, oh, this is shit because I saw GSP, and do you know what I mean? It's like, well, no, like, and I think that's a real good thing, because I think then, like how you were saying before, how we can be real hard on ourselves. I think that's where it kind of starts from, because we go into something, we have this idea that like, oh my god, I saw, you know, in my case, it could be like, oh, I saw, you know, Mackenzie Dern, like you said, tap out this person. No, I want to go into jiu-jitsu. And then you're nowhere near Mackenzie Dern level. And you're like, oh, but what? And it's like, okay, but like, yeah, it's like be inspired by Mackenzie Dern, but then realize that it takes a long time to get to Mackenzie Dern level.
I'm never going to be Mackenzie Dern.
Do you know what I mean? And that's fine as well. And I think that's a thing, is that we go into these things like inspired by greatness, and then when we don't achieve greatness within the first like hour, we're like, oh, it's not for me. Do you know what I mean? It's like, but you, like, I don't care if you're the best, like LeBron James, like I said, or Michael Jordan, in like whatever it is. They didn't achieve greatness in the first time they picked up a basketball. Like, I don't care who you are. So, and I think that's a real good, because I think that fear of failure and that fear of sucking is what stops us from even going, like, opening the door in the first place, you know? And if we went in there with very, like, with jiu-jitsu, because I was such a nerd on jiu-jitsu without ever studying it, I knew exactly what to expect. So when I went to my first class, I was like, I will get tapped out a million times. And, like, I probably won't tap someone out for the first, like, 3 months,
Mm-hmm.
and that's fine. Like, I went in with that expectation. Do you know what I mean? And I think and then because I did, I enjoyed it because I knew what I was going into.
Yeah,
Whereas if I went in there thinking I was going to triangle someone from the
exactly.
jump, and then I didn't do it, I would have been really bummed with myself, and I'd be like, "Oh, this isn't for me. Then maybe I should just be a fan and watch it and nothing else." I think that's a real good point that you make, because I've never really thought of it like that. But yeah, we kind of we put this massive expectation on ourselves to be great from the get go, and we see people in greatness, but we don't see their journey to
Yeah,
greatness.
yeah.
And yeah, and you're a black belt. You understand that journey more than most.
And it gave me a formula. So when I say that like jujitsu, changed my life, saved my life, all that, like I mean it because it gave me a formula, meaning every day, sometimes I'm going to feel like I took 3 steps back. So you just have to show up. That's literally all you have to do in the beginning, is to show up, be ready to learn. And that's it. You can't expect anything else. And I think people want to feel those individual wins. And that's great. Find your own wins. If you manage to like complete one hip escape during a roll, that's a win. Fuck yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
and so you need to remember your scale, right? So I can't sit there and judge myself based on this person's progress. And it makes it easy that way because jiu-jitsu is belts and you wear the belts
right,
and you look at someone, you're like, okay, that person knows more than I do. That person's
yeah,
been here longer than I do. So I learned that if you just do something regularly and you're open to learning, you will get someplace. You don't, and maybe it'll be a different place than you
yeah,
expected, but you're going to be better. And so I knew that if I was going to start anything, I was going to suck for a long time, like in the beginning, but if you keep trying, if you keep doing it, keep showing up, that's where it matters. And that's when I was like, wow, you really can accomplish absolutely anything. You just have to do the work. So
yeah, yeah.
when I had friends that like were peers, and it just so happens that we met at the gym. I'm a purple belt sponsored. I'm going to Abu Dhabi. I'm going to all these other places to compete. And my friend's a white belt. And like we are peers. We get along. We're same age, but she's a white belt. So by hanging out with me, she's like, well, I want to get sponsored and I want to do all these things. And it's like, I know that you see it because you think that it's like super easy and all these things, like it's just going to happen. But you have to pay your dues. So
Yeah.
when I look at people at my own gym that are just better at kickboxing than me, I don't say, oh my God, I suck at kickboxing. It's just like, no, I either have a lot to learn from this person, but either way, it's like, that's why people say 1% better in jiu-jitsu. It's almost like and we reward people. There's stripes. So there's 4
Yeah.
stripes. No, and for kids, it's like 8 stripes because, you got to keep them
Yeah.
kids. But like when you get a stripe that says you're making progress, you're getting to where you're going. And maybe you don't even feel like it because you just got tapped 7 times, but
Yeah.
someone's looking out for your progress. And
Yeah.
everyone has different progress. And so everyone has a different journey. So even though you are inspired by someone else's journey, your journey is always going to be different. It's not going to be better. It's not going to be worse. It's going to be different. And what we get mixed up in is the validation of what we achieve. Because when we look at the only reason we know about Mackenzie Dern is because there's media on her. I mean, I knew her from jiu-jitsu, but I mean, if you were talking about, UFC Mackenzie Dern, then yeah, I'm going to look at that and just feel like I have nothing. But I know her dad. I've been to her family gym. I know that she's been training since she could walk. There's nothing that you could do about that. But then when I read this book by David Epstein called Range, they talks about right in the beginning, talks about Tiger Woods, who started, who his dad made him a golf player since he could walk. And was like, you're going to do this one singular thing and you're going to be the best at it. And then you have Roger Federer, who's a tennis player, amazing tennis player. And he played like all the sports. And his parents were like, yeah, sure, go do tennis, I guess, if you like it. But you're going to do this, this, and this. So that's the thing. Like we can never say that our journey is going to be a certain way. We don't know. But it's also important that we try a lot of different things on the way. Because maybe that worked for someone, but it's not always going to work. And maybe you have to find what you're good at. And it's like, I know that I think it was like, there was this one movie, Little Miss Sunshine, and they're in the van, and the brother says how, because he just wanted to be like a fighter pilot, I think, and then he was colorblind, so they said that he couldn't
Right.
do it, and
Right.
he just has this massive breakdown, and they have to stop the van, and he's freaking out, like, oh my god, my one path is done. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that just shows that you can't put all your eggs in one basket.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're good at something and things are working out, like full on, but you have to be adaptive. If I go to you and we're rolling and I try to pass with an over under and it's not working, what am I going to
Yeah.
do? Wait till I get triangled? Like, no,
Yeah.
I'm going to try a different pass. And the best
Right.
wrestlers, the best kickboxers, the best MMA fighters are people that know that most likely their first attack is not going to work. It's going to be the second or the third, and they have to
Mm-hmm.
chain them together, and they have to go off of the person's reactions. So, I mean, I think people just have that like expectation, like you said, and
Mm.
you have to take it for what it is and enjoy every day. Because if you're just focused on the end result, which is what I was for a little bit, of being the best, oh, I have to win this tournament, I have to win that tournament, I have to do this, I have to do that. And I put a lot of unnecessary stress on myself because of it. And now in MMA, I know that you said like, oh, you probably want to be in the UFC. Like, yeah, that'd be fucking great. I'm going to be in the UFC. It's
Yeah.
cool. But I'm not saying that anymore. I'm not going to say
Right.
I'm going to go I'm going to be in the UFC. I'm going to be in this, because what if I only end up in Invicta? What if I only end up in Bellator? Does that mean that I didn't ever make it? That I was never a good MMA fighter? No, I just don't want to put those like limitations on. And I just want to see where mine goes, because that's what's more exciting. What's more exciting is like, wow, like I don't even know what great shit I'm going to do, but it's going to be
Yeah.
awesome because I'm going to take it day by day,
Yeah.
versus getting upset every day that it doesn't work. If I try to triangle you over and over again, it's not working, I'm going to go home and think that I suck because I couldn't get this one triangle on you,
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like, you can't sum it up that way.
Yeah, it's the futility of comparison. Like we speak about it quite a lot. Like we always compare ourselves to other people and the end result and whatever else, and ultimately is a futile,
Very.
because it's so futile, because you're never ever going to compare yourself with someone who's had the exact same journey, the exact same tools, or in sports, for example, the exact same physiological kind of weapons or that they
Or
can use.
support
So
or
yeah, or whatever. So like you said, like, okay, well, Mackenzie Denners gets to UFC. Let's say if you get to Bellator, does that mean you've not achieved as much as she has, or vice versa,
I'm a
or whatever?
shittier
It doesn't.
Mackenzie Dern.
Yeah, like no, like it doesn't mean any of that.
Yeah.
It just means that like you've taken a different path, and that's all that means. And we get so caught up in it, like if I look, for example, if I look at my podcast now and then I compare it to Joe Rogan, I'll never record another podcast in my life. So I'll be like, how the hell am I going to get a £150 million Spotify deal? This is never going to happen. But if I don't do that, and if we circle back all the way to what we said right at the beginning, which is focus on yourself, and then if that's what you focus on and you don't compare, then you kind of start to build your own path. And you don't worry about other people's paths. And sometimes their path might overtake you, but then there might be you can't see it, but there might be a massive hitch in that road, and then you kind of overtake them or whatever, or And I think like we're so like competitive with stuff, and even to the point with mental health. Like I was talking to one of my good friends, and he's led a relatively charmed life. And I've had a few like personal difficulties, and I was, just confiding in him and stuff. And he was saying, man, I feel like real guilty because I've never really had anything like happen to me. And, like you're going through all this shit and I just feel so bad for you and blah, blah. And I just said to him, I was like, bro, it's not depression in Olympics. Like, you know what I mean? Like you split up with your girlfriend. I've never split up with my girlfriend. Like, I don't know how I would deal with that. Like he dealt with it real well. Like maybe that might floor me, whereas like I had some maybe on paper what seemed like some darker shit, but we get in this thing, like even with mental health, we compare and we're like, no, but my thing's darker than yours and I had more suffering than you did. And it's like, yeah, but what to you is like a real small, maybe not even a problem, to someone else might be like the biggest thing they're going through, and vice versa. I think we could stop that. And like we said right at the start, like it's a nice kind of circle. But if we just focus on ourselves, have that humility, don't have that ego, and have that self-confidence to know, like, I can get through this because I've got through little things. Like you said, it's a hip escape in one roll. I never thought I could do that. Now I can do that. Well, that's giving me confidence to be like, yeah, like now I can do that. Now I can get over my anxiety that I never thought I could get over. And you start to get there, and before
mental.
you know it, like you're
all
all
view
mental.
right? You
Yeah.
could look at that. Like,
Right.
I joke with my mom because obviously, like, I'm very mental health minded in my house, and I live with my mom. And so when she starts getting like worked up, I try to bring her back, get
Yeah.
grounded. So one time because we moved into this house last year. No, this year. It's only been like a couple months. Feels like forever. So we're like moving this my mattress like down the hall, right? And there was an
Hmm.
air conditioner. What do you call that? Whatever the
Filter.
thing. No, the thing that you go, I'm going to make it hotter now. The thermostat.
Oh, the remote. Yeah, thermostat.
Whatever you call it. We're going to have different words. So I knock it off, right? And it kind of like
Uh-huh.
falls apart. And she goes, no, I'm going to have to buy a new one. And I'm
Yeah.
like, dude, let me just assess. I'll just put it back together, put it back on the wall. And she goes, oh, I'm like, it's not the end of the world. She goes, yes, it is. And I'm like, really? Yeah. So we laugh
Wow.
about it now,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I didn't like minimize her emotions. I just was like, I of course I laugh because that's just how we deal with it. But also I was like, trust me, like I could fix this. Like I'm going to fix
Hmm.
this. And if I can't fix exactly this, like it's okay. We're going to get through this. So
Yeah. Yeah.
sometimes it's just the littlest thing because a bunch of different stressors. And then one thing, because obviously moving is very stressful, especially during COVID. So
Yeah. Right.
there's a lot going on, so I
Yeah. Yeah.
respected that. But at the same time, I'm like, you need to stop freaking out because then I'll freak out. So like,
Yeah.
let's just keep things, But
Yeah. Yeah.
on the idea of like comparing to others, it's so weird how no one teaches you to like look within. Like no one looks
Mm.
within. Everyone is always like, no, I'm stressed because I have a payment due and I don't have money for it. I'm stressed because I have to plan a wedding and I don't know how. I'm, like it's so many like blaming, and my dad did that
Hmm.
a lot. So
Hmm.
my dad killed himself in 2015, and that's pretty much
I'm sorry to
why.
hear that.
That's okay. I've learned a lot from it, and I'm like,
Right.
okay, like what it was a lot of it was just confusing, obviously, and it always will be.
Hmm.
Um, but we endured, and we went to like counseling right away, and that was his decision. And a
Yeah.
lot of times we look at blame. My dad used to do that. He used to go, no, you made me mad because you
Right.
did this,
Yeah.
or I'm stressed out because I don't have control over this thing that is making me angry.
Mm.
And it's like, well, there's going to be a lot of things that you can't control, like specifically traffic in Los Angeles, because I drive so
Right.
far to my gym. There are things that like, so I used to tell my mom, I'd say, okay, well, if I'm expecting traffic, if I know it's possible, then I'm going to be less like, what the fuck? So I
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
GPS, I
Yeah.
look at Google Maps, things like that. Like I try to get an
Right.
idea of what I am to expect. But if I don't know what to expect and there are bad things, then okay, I have to deal with it. And then there was a time where it was a Starbucks. I'm guilty. It's like all we have around here. So I go to a Starbucks and there's a long line. And my mom's like, oh, So I look at
Hmm.
her and I say, here's where I make my decision. I say, if I wait in this line, then it means that, yeah, okay, it's worth it for what I want to get, for this latte that
Hmm.
I'm going to get. But if I make an assessment and I go, waiting that long is not worth
Hmm.
it for me, then I'll
Hmm.
leave. But the
Yeah.
second that I get in line, that means that I've accepted it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and those are
Yeah. Yeah.
conscious decisions that I have made to say, okay, Erin, you're going to have to wait a little bit, but if
Yeah.
you're okay with this, let's do it. And so
Yeah.
while I'm standing there, my mom's like, oh, the line's so long. I'm like, you can't do that. You
Yeah.
already
No,
accepted it.
it's what we said before, right? Control what you can control, and the rest of it is what it is. Like, and I've really tried to adopt that mantra. It is what it is. Like, control what I can control, and that stuff that I can change if I don't like it, or I can help improve, or like I said, looking within, what is it that I can do better? I've got an Italian temper, and sometimes I lose my shit at the
You're just
dumbest
like,
stuff. Yeah,
oh.
yeah, exactly. And I lose my stuff at the dumbest stuff, and I'm like, well, that wasn't like, okay, maybe they did something wrong, but that didn't deserve the reaction that I gave,
Uh-huh.
and that's on me, and that's not on the other person. And like, I need to control that, and I need to make that better, right? And the rest of it is what it is. So, like you said, like I want to have a latte, and I want to go to Starbucks, and then there's a massive line. It is what it is. Do you still want the latte? Yeah. Get in line. If not, go
Yeah.
home. Do you know what I mean? And there's no other choice.
Yeah.
Before, I don't want to take up too much of your time because I know you're going to have training later, and you've been real generous with it. I just want to, before we go, I want to give you the opportunity to talk about Submit the Stigma, which the t-shirt you're wearing there now. Like, what is that charity, and like what does it do, and how can people maybe get involved if they hadn't heard about it before?
So the charity is a recognized nonprofit in the U.S. In other words, like a 501c3. So
Mm-hmm.
it is a charity that is less about raising money. It is more about the awareness. So there are a lot of people that it's sort of like creating a community for people to understand and to be
Right.
able to communicate about what they're feeling, because so much about martial arts is like stoic, or we don't show emotion.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then you go and you meet a bunch of Brazilians who are like bawling their eyes out because they either lost or they won. And then you're like, so
Yeah.
emotion is okay. Um,
Yeah.
and so yeah, like when I started crying over frustration, and it was making people feel awkward, and I had to kind of go, well, this is just what I do.
Mm-hmm.
So you might either put it all inside and deal with it
Mm-hmm.
later, or never deal with it until it just explodes, or you talk things out right away, or there's different things. And I'm like, I feel emotion, or if I get angry, I cry. Like I cry. And some people are
Mm-hmm.
like, oh no, she's out of control. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
no, I'm not out of control, because I'm still doing it. I'm still doing what I need to do. I'll train and cry at the same time. I'll beat your fucking ass and I'll cry at the same time. Like, it doesn't mean that I've lost control. And so emotion is such a big thing in my life that it
Right.
either has scared people, or especially on the mat, people are like, I don't know what to do. And so obviously I've learned to keep my emotions in check over the years, but I've learned that when other people have emotion, I want them to feel it's okay. Like, and
Mm-hmm.
that they're not alone, so whether it means empathizing with someone during their white belt journey, or
Right.
it means, just lending an ear for someone to vent about their husband cheating on them. I don't know. There's so many
Yeah.
reasons that people need to be able to feel heard and feel validated. And I think jujitsu does that a lot. There's a lot of support. And I try to tell people, I say, how when you're training and it's usually the same people, they've got their schedule, you've got yours, and maybe you even have a main training partner that you partner up with every single Tuesday class, right? Then they're not
Mm-hmm.
there. And you're like, shit, I wonder if Jim's okay because he's not here. So you do a check-in, and
Mm-hmm.
really people should be doing that for mental health. Like, and it takes
Yeah.
two seconds to say, hey, are you all right? Are you okay? Are you doing
Right.
okay? Or oh, hey, I've noticed that you've been a little off lately. Are you doing okay? It's so easy to
Mm-hmm.
check on people, and jiu-jitsu being such a consistent training uh, regime, of everything and the routine and the consistency. It's like you see people all the time. You're going to know if they're off
Right.
their game, off whatever. So be that person to let them to talk, or maybe they don't want to talk, but just say, hey, I'm here for you. Because that makes all the difference. Because unfortunately, with mental health and mental illness, a lot of us don't want to be a burden, because like the stigma against it is like, oh no, you're mentally ill. You don't know how to be in society. You're a threat to yourself and others. Oh no, you're a ticking
Mm-hmm.
time bomb. Like all these bad negative ideas of mental illness, and it's just not the case. It's just not
Mm.
the case. I mean, we're just some like sappy, sad, emotional people for the most
Yeah.
part. And we just need someone to talk to. So checking in on someone is a really good way. And having that support, seeing the same people, having the goal setting, right? The stripes, the belts, the
Mm-hmm.
competitions, all of those. Obviously, the physical aspect. Like I stopped eating burritos before I trained because I was farting on everybody. Now I eat healthier. So it was like little
Yeah.
changes when I was training that made me a better person. And it's like it's just you don't have to think about it. It's not your burden anymore. You go to
Mm-hmm.
class. You just all you have to do is show up and try,
Mm-hmm.
and like your mental health gets better, because like I said, there's little wins, there's
Yeah.
goals, there's achievements. And when you get your belt, when you get your stripe, everybody claps, everybody says
Yeah.
congrats. It feels
Yeah.
really, really good. And so
Yeah.
whether
Yeah.
the Gracies knew this or not, or whoever kind of modernized this like jujitsu gym type of atmosphere, it's so amazing. I mean, when they
Mm-hmm.
started, the Gracies were like, come here and fight me on the beach. It
Yeah.
was
Yeah. Yeah.
proving how well jujitsu works for either self-defense or macho-ness or anything. And now it's
Right.
just like, get over here. Let's hug it out for
Yeah.
10 minutes.
Be-
So
yeah.
it's a really beautiful thing. And I wanted to make people aware of that link,
Yeah.
so that people who have gotten help realize that there are others who do get help too, or people who don't have professional help and should get professional help. That's kind of like a gateway to that.
Mm-hmm.
And also to, everyone who experiences mental illness, you don't need a diagnosis. You don't need a
No.
diagnosis to experience loss. Your mom doesn't need to die for you to experience loss. You don't need a breakup to experience loss, although those are really, really heavy things.
Yeah.
Losing a tournament can sometimes bring up those feelings too.
Yeah.
So it's really important to keep things in check. And again, just to go back to like yourself,
Yeah.
And when I was fighting in the worlds at brown belt, I wrote down third person. I said, "You are great. You've trained hard. I'm so proud of you. This person would be so proud of you, blah, blah, blah." And I'd read it to myself because I felt like someone else was saying it back to me. And
Right.
I did. I performed the best that I had performed. And it was really cool because I was like my biggest cheerleader. So
Love it. Submit the stigma. Absolutely beautiful message. And for people who want to follow kind of your like career, maybe even see you, who knows, against Mackenzie Dern in the UFC fighting for a belt.
Right.
This could happen. Let's speak it into existence right here. For people who want to follow you, and I know you've got your own website, and you're pretty prolific on Instagram as well. Like, where can people find you? Where can people kind of keep up?
I'm on Instagram a lot. In fact, me and my boyfriend talk the most through Instagram. We're long distances. Like, we use Instagram. So there is usually the best. I also have a Submit the Stigma Instagram, which has a bunch of stories of people who train jiu-jitsu and how there's like been a mix between their mental health and jiu-jitsu and how jiu-jitsu has actually helped them deal with their mental
Love
health.
it.
Also submitthestigma.org and erinherle.com. But otherwise, just Erin Herle is my Instagram handle, and you can always find me there. I think I found you there versus the getting into spam
email.
and
Yeah, exactly. Gmail trying to fuck this up. I was not having it. But we'll tag you, so anyone who's listening to this who wants to find out, they can just click on the tags and they can find you. I really just want to thank you. Thank you for coming on and being so generous with your time. And also, I really just want to thank you for kind of being in the world that you're in, like martial arts competition, and speaking so openly about mental health. I think like. You said before how martial arts is so stoic and it's always about I'm the best and I'm going to defeat you and I'm going to fuck you up and this, that, and the other. And to have someone who will openly say like, these are my flaws and this is how I'm feeling and this is what I've gone through, but yeah, I'm still competing. Yep. And not only am I competing, but like I'm up there, I'm world-class level. I think that's real inspirational for anyone who's suffering right now. And I just like really hope that you keep on doing it, keep on fighting the good fight, and we'll be following you for sure. Everyone at the F Lights. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you.